Good evening, everyone, and welcome to today's Focus Weekly session, whereby we are going to discuss the important topics from geography, environment, as well as disaster management section, which have been there in newspapers in the last week. We all know that the newspapers which we cover are range from the Hindu, Indian Express, Times of India, Economic Times, as well as some of the important magazines like Yojana Kurukshetra, and most importantly, Down to Earth. Okay, so if you see that, because recently there have been a lot of articles which are talking about the budget and economic survey, so obviously a lot of topics have come from economic perspective. But from the geography and environment, we are able to find few important topics which are relevant, and the topics are listed on your screen. But today's discussion is mainly focused towards the mains, because all the three topics are from the mains perspective. Okay, so the topics is in relation to the groundwater issues in India, because recently a report has come up in regard of the northwestern part of India, especially the Punjab area, whereby groundwater scarcity has been felt at a very large scale. The second topic is wind energy analysis in India, and the third is hydro energy. So both these topics are from the renewable energy sector, because we know that in the mains in the last 3 to 4 years we have seen that, because India is also focusing on renewable energy, and India has a lot of international commitments also, that we are going to reduce our carbon emission intensity, we are going to scale up our renewable energy production, we are going to reduce the fossil use consumption, and also India is having a net zero emission targets also. So in the view of this, we know that the domestic policies are moving to a direction whereby the renewable energy is increasing its share when it comes to total installed generation capacity, right? So that is the thing. Still, I agree that presently in India, more than 50% the installed generation capacity goes to the fossil fuels, where you have coal, you have gas, right? So, but when it comes to renewable energy sector also, it is gradually increasing. So that is why hydro energy and wind energy, both the topics will be discussed in today's session. Without wasting much time, let us begin with this. So this is the first topic which has come. So there is a World Bank study which has observed that the farm subsidies, that the agriculture subsidies which India is providing in form of, because it started with green revolution, and then now we are providing subsidies on electricity, which is leading to a lot of groundwater extraction. Then we are also providing the MSP, which is supporting rice and wheat, and then we are also having the support guarantee for the sugar cane. All these are water intensive crops, which again is leading to groundwater extraction. So especially in the Gangetic Plains area, and more importantly in the northwest part of the Gangetic Plains, where you have Punjab, Haryana, as well as Western UP. This is this section whereby a lot of critical blocks, whereby groundwater has gone way below the existing table. So the critical blocks have increased, right? So in this relation, what are the possible dimensions which can be asked by UPSC? We are going to discuss it. Okay. So first of all, because we are into the geography class, so we need to understand, when we look at the previous year questions, we find that a lot of questions in GS paper 1 have been asked focusing on regional analysis. That means they have asked you to focus on the region and to analyze that how a particular phenomena, let's say, is varying across different regions, how different regions, what unique characteristics of different regions are having, how different two regions are, right? So in this very regard, let us first see the spatial distribution of the groundwater in India. If we roughly draw the India's map, so here we need to understand that what is the spatial aspect of the groundwater distribution in India. Okay, that which regions in India are having, high groundwater reserves, and which regions generally lack in groundwater area. So first of all, if we have to mark the regions which are rich in groundwater, so can I say that this region, that is the entire Gangetic plain, Indus plain, Ganga plain, as well as Brahmaputra plain, this particular region, because it is having a lot of rivers, so this region is generally called as the groundwater rich region in India. Yes, this is true. Along with this, the coastal parts of India, that is along the eastern coast, here also, because you are having mighty rivers having deltaic formations. So delta is here. So here in these two parts, generally the groundwater is at a higher scale. Also, if we have to talk about the factors, that which are the factors which make these two regions as the rich groundwater reserves, the first one is the presence of rivers. Second one is the presence of alluvial soils, because these alluvial soils are porous in nature. They also have relatively better permeability, and these alluvial soils allow the water to percolate and seep into the ground. This region also has decent amount of rainfall. I won't say that very high amount of rainfall, because very high amount of rainfall in India is experienced in the Western Ghats as well as the northeastern portion. But this plain area as well as the deltaic regions, they also have pretty decent rainfall. Next factor is the plain topography, the plain or leveled topography. So this plain area basically provide the proper surface and allows the water to remain stationary over there. Hence, it can percolate. This you can understand by having a contrasting example from the hilly states. For example, let's say in Meghalaya, the region in northeast, you will experience one of the highest rainfalls in northeast. What do you think? What about groundwater? Because this region, except barring this Assam plains, northeast India, that is, let's talk about Meghalaya. So Meghalaya experiences one of the highest rainfalls. You have Mausinram, Cherrapunji over there. What do you think, that what is the status of groundwater over there? Is it more, is it groundwater rich, or is it groundwater scarce if there is very high rainfall? So it is groundwater scarce. Yes, high rainfall is one of the factors. For example, here we have written it, but then the Meghalaya region also has a very steep slopes, right? So if the slopes are very steep, if the gradient is very steep, so water, whatever in the form of river or in the form of rainfall, whatever water is present on this steep slope will eventually move so fast that it will not get the time to seep into the ground, and most the part of the water will form the part of a surface runoff. So when there will be a lot of surface runoff, then the water will not seep in and the groundwater will not be much. So that is why, despite the fact that in these Western Ghats areas as well as this northeastern areas, despite you have very high rainfall, but the groundwater availability is not that very high, right? Also, if we divide India with, let's say, 100 centimeter iso height diagram. So this is the rough 100 centimeter iso height diagram. The area within this 100 centimeter iso height is generally a rainfall deficit area, and the area which is outside this iso height is rainfall surplus area, barring this particular region. This is also cold desert, we understand this. So if we are talking about this particular part, so this region, right? This region is lying in a rain shadow area, right? So obviously it will be lacking in rainfall and hence groundwater. Second, if we have to talk about the base rock structure of this peninsula, so it is rigid as well as impermeable. So if the rock structure is impermeable, whatever water is present on the surface of the rocks, it will not be able to seep into the groundwater, and hence there will be lacking in groundwater, right? So this peninsular region, because it is lying in rain shadow area and the rocks are very rigid, hence again there you will have very less amount of groundwater. If we have to talk about this particular region, so this is arid climate, arid as well as semi arid areas, right? So here you are having deserts, and deserts are characterized by higher evaporation vis-a-vis the precipitation. So here also, the desert by definition is the region where you do not have much water. So obviously you will not have a groundwater also. If we are talking about this area, that is the central Indian region, Bundelkhand area, northern MP, southern UP section. So this region is known to have bad land topography. So this region also will be lacking in groundwater. It is known to have a lot of ravines. It is known to have a lot of gullies, right? So because of these things, we can see that majority portion of India is lacking in groundwater. And that too, if we are talking about these minor areas where you have groundwater, so because these are agriculturally intensive areas, so these areas are also facing a lot of groundwater crisis. So one section of India is not having groundwater, and the other section of India, which earlier was having groundwater, is now facing water scarcity. Why? Because of the irrational water usage. And most of that water is used in the agricultural part. Are you getting it? So we'll discuss this also. In this part, if we have to see, this one section is remaining in India. Okay. So here you have Narmada River and here you have Tapi River. So this is just one section in this entire peninsular India, where you will have some groundwater, because again, these two rivers are mighty rivers and these rivers are flowing, we know, through the rift valleys, right? So these valleys are having some of the groundwater, but otherwise across the India, we have understood the situation. Also, it is to be understood that every area, every region in India is having its own challenge. For example, when we are talking about this Gangetic Plain area, here you are having the challenge of excessive groundwater extraction, right? Here you are having excessive extraction. When we are talking about the groundwater in this coastal area, here you have the issue of salinity intrusion, because the saline sea water is in vicinity. So salinity intrusion is there. So the groundwater is becoming saline in this particular area. This region anyway is not having groundwater, so there is a scarcity. Then there are few areas, for example, in West Bengal area, in Rajasthan, in Punjab also, you will find some areas where you have the issue of groundwater contamination. For example, in Bengal, you have arsenic contamination. In Rajasthan, there are some areas which are having fluoride contamination. In Punjab, there are few areas which are having nitrate contamination. So, what are we discussing? We are discussing the spatial aspect from the geography's perspective about groundwater distribution, which factors impact groundwater distribution in different parts of India, how different parts of India in terms of groundwater are facing different types of challenges also, right? So this is the spatial aspect of the groundwater in India, and this will help you to write mains answer. If you see this particular diagram, the things which we have discussed, that the blue areas basically show that the groundwater rich areas and rest of the India is groundwater deficit areas. If we have to make the regions, so obviously we can see that northern mountains and terrains and hilly area is one region. Here the issues lies because of landslides and tourism pressure. This is the issue. Indo-Gangetic plains, Brahmaputra alluvial plains, there is the issue of high extraction. We have just discussed it. Similarly, the peninsular shield area, so just in small fractures, the water is available over there. So that means the quantity is very less in this area. Coastal areas are experiencing saline water intrusions. And when we talk about this Narmada and Tapi area, here we have seen that they are basically the fault basin areas, but still low rainfall areas. So you have groundwater, but again not comparable to the obviously the Ganga and Brahmaputra plains, right? So this is the spatial distribution. If we see this particular graph, you can see that when we are talking about the groundwater sources, so the majority source is what? Rainfall. 68% were direct ingress of the rainwater into the ground. So majority share is by rainfall when it is about sources. But when we are talking about the groundwater usage, so you will see that agriculture is responsible for the 87% of the groundwater extraction. After agriculture, you have domestic usage, and the least one is the industrial usage, the lowest share, because industries require a very large amount of water. Groundwater cannot supply with it. But when we are talking about agriculture, because we know that a lot of subsidies, the topic which we are discussing, a lot of subsidies are provided by the state governments in terms of electricity and all those aspects. So the farmers basically are extracting the groundwater, and they are not completely aware that what consequences can it lead to in the coming foreseen future, right? So this is the thing. Agriculture shares the highest burden of the groundwater extraction. In this regard, let us discuss few other facts also. So when we are talking about the spread, we have discussed this groundwater spread it in Himalayas, northern plains, peninsular shield area, coast, and the fault areas, Narmada Tapi areas. We have discussed this thing. Then we have challenges of the groundwater. That what are the important challenges? The first challenge is, as we have discussed, is the uneven distribution of groundwater in India. There are few areas which are having a lot of groundwater, but there are other areas which are just completely devoid of groundwater. So first challenge is uneven distribution. Second, again, the over extraction. Data suggests that per year around 1 to 2 meter of the groundwater table on an average is going down. So every year 1 to 2 meter of groundwater has been lost. We are losing on it. So over extraction. Then the issue is of contamination. We have discussed, for example, arsenic pollution in West Bengal, fluoride contamination in Rajasthan, uranium contamination, nitrate pollution. So all these things are there, right? And all this contamination basically led to different types of diseases. For example, nitrate contamination leads to blue baby syndrome. This you might have read also for your prelims, right? Similarly, when we talk about the arsenic contamination, it leads to black foot disease. The fluoride contamination leads to skeletal deformities. The uranium contamination leads to kidney disorders. So this contamination is very much impacting the health of the people living in that area, right? Next issue is of salinity intrusion. Then the recharge is also getting reduced. One, we are not having groundwater. Second, we are mismanaging it. Third is we are not recharging the existing groundwater aquifers. So we are going for concretization. We are building cities. We are building pavements and roads which are made out of impervious layer, which is not allowing the water to enter to seep into the ground. Right. So now we have cities. The agricultural land is getting reduced. The wetlands have been encroached. So all this has led to what? It has led to reduction in the seepage of rainwater into the ground, and there is no recharge because of the concretization, wetland encroachment, erratic rainfall, land degradation. Right? And the last but not the least cause for the challenge when it comes to groundwater related issues are the Easement Act. Okay, so the Easement Act of 1882 says that if you are a owner of a particular land, the water below that land will also is also your property, so you can extract that water, right? So but the point is that when you are extracting the water which is there below your land, below your agriculture field, when the groundwater table is going down, the groundwater table is not going only down in your area, it is going down across a region. So let's say if this is an region and your agricultural field is here, mine is here, someone else is here, and you are drawing a lot of water from this part. So the groundwater table will go down not only in your part, it will go equally down in this entire region. It will impact the water below my land also. Similarly, water below someone else's land also. So this is the thing. But the Easement Act suggests that the water, because it is your land, so water below it is your property, and you can obviously you will use your property as a way you want, right? So that is why some of the experts say that this Easement Act needs to be reformed. However, here we have discussed the challenges. Now comes to the management and conservation. The first and the foremost step is the integrated development has to take place. One water approach, right? What do we understand by one water approach? It is the same water which you are having in lakes, in ponds, in rivers, as a groundwater, in oceans, in atmosphere. Hydrological cycle is what? Hydrological cycle tells you that it is the same water which is just having a circulatory path. The same water is sometimes frozen, sometimes falls down as precipitation, it enters into different water bodies, it then gets back evaporated. So if you are going for the water management conservation, first you need to understand that there is just one water, and therefore integrated development has to take place, and this is also supported by Mihir Shah recommendations, right? Mihir Shah recommendations for water governance. The first point is that Mihir Shah says that combine Central Groundwater Board as well as Central Water Commission into a same body, National Water Commission. Here also he is giving a signal that groundwater and the surface water both should be combined and should come under one body. Second, agriculture and irrigation reforms. We have just seen that 87% problem related to groundwater extraction is is in the agricultural sector. So if you can reform agriculture, if you can go for micro irrigation techniques, if you can go for agroclimatics based selection of crops, right? So all these things basically will lead to what? It will lead to the reduction in the groundwater usage. The third recommendation is reviving the paleo channels, recharging the aquifers, going for traditional irrigation systems like khadin, johars, bawlis, ponds, earthen check dams, etc. Next is adequate town planning has to be there. So modern town planning, which gives adequate importance to green spaces as well as blue spaces in a city. So if you are building a city, it should not be built in a way that you are encroaching all the wetlands. So there have to be adequate parks, there have to be adequate lakes. The outer areas of city must be green, so there should be forest, so that there is a sustainable town planning. It obviously is going to impact the groundwater usage, right? Then the governance reforms are also there. The first is involving the panchayats, right? So the role of local bodies are very important when it comes to the conservation of resources, and same is true for the groundwater also. So if the local bodies like panchayats or urban local bodies, ULBs as well as PRIs, both of these institutions play a very important role. Along with these local bodies, the role of women, youth and children are very important. Second thing is creating barefoot groundwater experts with the diplomas. That is, providing the specialized skills to our youth in this particular area, because this challenge is going to be very vicious. It will develop a very vicious cycle in which India will be caught. So that is why you need to develop skills in the youth to deal with this particular aspect. We can also go for technological measures like automated water extraction system embedded with AI and data sensors. So immediate the suction pump will be closed once it has reached beyond a certain level, like that. Okay. So these are some of the management and conservation efforts when it comes to groundwater. Here we have discussed the challenges associated with it, and also we have discussed the spatial aspect of the groundwater, right? So this was the first topic. Moving towards the next topic, this topic has come in Times of India, and the topic is in relation to the wind power. Now, this is one of the important developments covered by almost all the major newspapers, that basically this topic independently is not important, that what is this context. Okay, so this is just a reference because it is there in the news. But wind energy is a very important topic. UPSC has asked questions in relation to wind energy. So I hope you have gone through the PYQs and you have seen a question that wind energy cannot be deployed every year. We cannot generate wind energy from every place of India. So there are few strengths of a place which make that particular area to be more favorable to wind energy. Other areas might not be favorable to generate wind energy. Maybe they will generate solar energy. Maybe they can generate biomass energy. That's a different thing, right? So in this sense, the UPSC has asked the question. So that's why in this regard, with the help of this particular context, we need to understand wind energy. Also importantly, when we are talking about the renewable energy sources form important part of both the papers, that is GS paper 1 as well as GS paper 3. So you can have the question in GS 1 or in GS 2, right? Okay. So we will cover all these aspects also one by one. First thing is that which are the favorable factors, that in which type of area you can develop the wind energy. As we have discussed, that every area is not conducive to develop wind energy, right? So you need to have some important factors which are beneficial to generate wind energy. Which are those factors? So for example, you can develop the wind energy on the top of plateaus or hills. So let's say this is a windmill and you have established it on the top of a plateau or a hill. How this is favorable? Because if you are establishing your windmill at a higher height, at a higher elevation, so there are less chances that there will be some sort of obstruction, right? To develop wind energy, to generate wind energy, obviously you need to have a wind which is moving with a great speed. A great speed in a wind will come only when there is no obstruction, and so you need obstruction less area. So just think about those areas which are obstruction less. So for example, on the top of the hill or a plateau, there will be less obstruction. So this is one of the favorable area. Second, in those areas which are not having high population density. For example, if you move to the Thar desert area, so Thar desert area is also relatively plain area. You are not having multi-story buildings, population density is not very high. So there also you have less obstruction, right? Similarly, you can develop wind energy in the offshore sea areas, because in offshore sea areas also, that offshore means off the coast, not in the India's mainland, but in deep into the sea. So in sea also you are not having buildings, right? So this is also in offshore areas you can develop wind energy because there is no obstruction. Similarly, you can also develop wind energy in the narrow valley areas which are funnel shaped. So funnel shaped means, let's say this is the shape of entry and the wind is moving from this area. Here you are having windmill. So what is happening, that the wind is entering from a relatively large cross section area. Eventually this cross section area is getting narrow, narrow and narrow. So what will happen, the velocity of the wind while moving through this funnel will increase, because cross section area is very less over here, and here a lot of wind has already entered the funnel. This is known as funnel effect. So that wind, when it will exit from this narrow opening, will be having relatively higher velocity. When it will be having a relatively higher velocity, obviously it will run the windmill, right? So these are some of the favorable areas that you require specific sites like top of hills, open plains, mountain gaps that funnel and intensify the wind. You can develop it in the offshore areas also, offshore sea areas. You require huge availability of land to establish the windmills. You require capital also. So in regions which are rich in capitals, obviously they are better suited. So these are favorable factors. What are the merits of wind energy? First is, obviously it is renewable in nature, self-explanatory point. If we are talking about the potential of wind energy, so India is having a very good potential of wind energy. Okay. India's potential is at the height of 120-meter, this height. So wind energy potential is measured at 120-meter height. So at 120-meter height, the approximate wind energy potential in India is around 700 gigawatt. That is 695 gigawatt. This we are talking about the land, the India's land. If we are talking about the offshore regions also, right? So there we are having additional 174 gigawatt of wind energy in the offshore areas. The highest potential within India, if we have to compare this in the context of different states, so the highest potential of India, just you think on your own, which states will be having higher potential? The states which are continental in nature, that is located in the interior parts of India, or the states which are coastal in nature. Obviously coastal in nature. So that is why the highest potential states are Gujarat, coastal state, Karnataka, coastal state. Then and third you have Rajasthan, which is not a coastal state, but because it is having a desert which is having an obstruction free wind, and hence it becomes a high potential. After Rajasthan, again you have Tamil Nadu, coastal state, then Maharashtra interior, then Maharashtra again, then Andhra again. So in top 7 states, around 4 to 5 states are coastal ones. In fact, the topmost state, two, Gujarat and Karnataka, are coastal states, right? So this is the merit, and obviously it will help to India fulfill its commitments, which we discussed in the beginning of this topic, right? When we are talking about the issues, that what are there when it comes to the issues related to wind energy, so the first issue is fluctuating wind speed. Obviously, if the wind speed is fluctuating, you cannot have a continuous generation of wind energy. Then you have many states are not coastal in nature. So interior states, again, you are having low potential. Higher focus on other forms like solar energy. So we are having a lot of schemes on focusing on solar energy. So there is a competition from solar energy itself. From the renewable energy perspective, that is good. But here we are talking about the challenges from the perspective not about renewable energy, but from the perspective of wind energy. So solar energy is a major dominant competitor. Then untapped offshore wind energy potential. We are having 175 gigawatt of potential, but still it is untapped. Then threats to avian fauna, because these high-rise windmills can influence the migratory patterns. So birds might mechanically strike these windmills, so their migratory path might be obstructed, right? And then the land use competition. To establish large wind based plants, you require a large tract of land, and land is a very scarce resource in all the countries, in India also. So, land is used for agriculture, land is used for settlement also, has to be used for solar energy plants also, land has to be used for this also. And if somehow that land is some resource is found below that land, so that land has to be gone for the mining also. That land might be good for, as an industrial site also. So a lot of things are happening on the land. Therefore land is a very scarce resource. Talking about the offshore wind energy, what is offshore wind energy? The energy which is taken from the force of winds out at sea, that is, it is established out on the sea, not in the land. Okay, what are the merits? First, it is renewable, unlimited, non-polluting, the nature of wind energy. The another merit is that it reduces the pressure on the land resource. This is also true. Now, because you are establishing the windmills in the sea, so obviously you do not want land, and that land can be better utilized for some other purpose. Then it is a barrier free region. We have discussed it. In seas, it is a barrier free, obstruction free area. So wind speed will be very high, which is very good. Visual and acoustic impact is also small. So there will be no sound which will be heard by humans. Marine life might be hearing those sounds, but humans care for themselves the most, right? So we tend to forget about the marine life also. When they are impacted, then we come up with the report that the biodiversity is losing. We have entered into sixth phase of biological annihilation. We have entered into sixth phase of mass extinction. This is a Anthropocene era. Then we talk a lot about those things, but here we are writing it as a merit. No issue of land acquisition. Fine. So India is has taken a lot of things that, if we have to think about the association of India and the offshore wind. So one, we are having a very long coastline, so hence a very high potential. National offshore wind energy policy is also there. When it comes to ministry, so MNRE, that is Ministry of New and Renewable Energy, act as a nodal ministry for this. And National Institute of Wind Energy carry out resource assessment surveys in the EEZ areas, exclusive economic zone areas, and it carries out the research and comes up with the report that whether which sites are beneficial. So all the research purposes is done by this in the context of offshore wind energy. So yes, we are taking some steps in this regard also, right? So this was the overall discussion about the wind energy, and not just the wind energy, but also a subcomponent of wind energy, which is offshore wind energy. Because nowadays we are focusing on the offshore wind energy also. Hence, there can be an independent question on the offshore wind energy component. Otherwise, the overall wind energy we have already done. Okay. Coming to the last topic. So as I've already told you that today is mains oriented session more, because news which we got were mainly from the mains perspective. So this is next topic, a lengthy topic again. Here we have to talk about the hydroelectric projects. Again, the largest India's largest hydro project is envisaged. So might be from the plains perspective that place is important, but from the mains perspective, we need to analyze the large hydropower projects. What are their merits, and more importantly, what are the issues associated with them, right? So again, we'll take the help of a flow chart. And again, as we have done for the wind energy, we will do the same for hydroelectric projects also. That is, as a student of geography, we need to understand that what are the favorable conditions, that which areas are favorable to generate hydro energy. Again, you cannot generate hydro energy from every area. You require certain pre-existing conditions. So which conditions will favor the development of hydro energy? So think about it. For so similarly, as in wind energy, you required high velocity winds. In hydro, to generate hydro energy, you require high velocity water, right? So that means the water should have very high velocity. So that means the water has to fall from height to the downside on the turbine. So that means the potential energy of this water, that is the height, should be very high. So more the height, more the potential energy, it will be converted into kinetic energy. So this is the first thing, that is the head of the water. Higher potential energy is required, right? The second thing is high volume and discharge of the water. So that is why you will get it on rivers. So major rivers will be an important favorable factor to generate hydro energy, and that too in the mountain areas. In the plain areas, those rivers are not having very high velocity and discharge. So you cannot establish hydro project in a plain flat surface. So it will be established in the mountain areas where there is a potential height, where there is a height, there is a potential energy, there is a head. Regular and reliable supply of water has to be there. It might be perennial river, that is the supply source is a glacier, or the supply source might be rainfall. The thing is that it should be a reliable, uninterrupted supply of water. Then presence of lakes. So in those areas where you have the pre-existing lakes, those lakes can perform the function of reservoirs. Otherwise, you need to artificially build a reservoir, and for that a huge area will be submerged, which can lead to upstream flooding, which can create a hydrostatic pressure, which can lead to landslides and earthquakes, and obviously evacuation, forced displacement of the people, right? Then low seismicity, obviously, in areas where you are having low seismicity, so those areas will be favorable because you need to create a very large structure for this. And large market and capital should also be there, right? So Bhakra Nangal project in Himachal Pradesh is basically supplying its energy to the northern India. It supplies its energy to Chandigarh, to Punjab, to Haryana, even to Delhi. So there is a very huge demand, there is a very huge market, which will obviously attract the investment, right? These are the favorable conditions for large hydroelectric projects. If we have to talk about merits, again, renewable energy. So the merits is, first is renewable source. Second, it is reliable as well as adjustable. So you can close the dam gates when you don't need water downstream. If you need it, you can open the dam gates. You can regulate the water supply with the help of these dams, right? So that means it is adjustable as well as reliable. Whenever you want it, you can get it. Next, it is a multi-purpose projects. It is not used only for electricity generation. It can be used for irrigation, agriculture. It can be used for tourism also, right? So a lot of things are there. Creation of reservoir tourism, yes, we have discussed it. Then disaster management also, because you are regulating the water of a river. So that means you can now control two important disasters, that is floods and droughts. Both the disasters associated with water, one is the surplus, one is the deficit. But now because water regulation is under you, so this gives you one possible solution for droughts as well as flood management, right? And then it leads to infrastructure development as well as jobs creation. These are some of the merits. Now talking about the issues. One very important is the disaster risks. Here we have discussed that the dams, large hydroelectric projects can help us to tackle two important disasters, that is floods and droughts. But the issue is they can lead to other important disasters. For example, the mismanagement of the dams can lead to the downstream floods, right? Immediately when you open the dam gates, so there is a flood in downstream areas. Even if you are not opening the flood gates, if you are saying that it is basically a human related issue, which I also agree, but what about the artificial reservoirs which are created in the upstream areas of the dams? So in the upstream areas, there is a permanent flood, right? So in upstream areas, with the help of creation of reservoirs, there is a huge land which is permanently submerged now, which is basically a perpetual flood. Then reservoir induced seismicity, we have a good example, the Koina reservoir, which has led to the local seismicity over that area. So because this creates a lot of pressure on the underlying rocks, and this introduces some local seismicity. Further, it intensifies other disasters like Gulf, cloudburst, etc. Okay, so just imagine if some dam is broken in the upstream area, all of that water is now moving to the glacial lake, which can be outbursted, which can intensify the floods, right? Because of the presence of large reservoirs, the evaporational rates of that particular local area is also changed. So there might be local precipitation. So all these factors basically are increasing the disaster risk of that particular region. Second issue is economic, very high initial cost because the infrastructure is so large. Then from the social perspective, large scale displacement has to be there. From the environmental perspective, deforestation will be there because the natural land use is changed, blocks the natural flow of rivers because in the reservoir you are collecting the river water, right? So it is blocking the natural flow. There are mass deaths of the fishes because now the migratory path is blocked, right? So this is an issue. High siltation, river water is bringing a lot of silts and a lot of sediments with it, which now is eventually getting collected in the reservoir. So the reservoir capacity is also getting low because the depth is getting shallower because on the base of the reservoir continuous siltation is taking place, right? If this siltation is taking place, if there would not have been any reservoir or a dam, then what would have taken place? The rivers would have carried the sediments to the downstream areas, and those sediments would have been transported to the agricultural fields. Agricultural fields also require a lot of silt and sediments. But now, because there is a reservoir which is collecting the water, the silt is also getting collected, and you are altering the sediment and silt load of water, which now is not able to reach to the groundwater or to the agricultural fields downstream. And suddenly, when you will open the gates, when a lot of water will be thrown from the gates and it will reach to the downstream agricultural areas, then what will happen? Immediately, there will be silt overload in the agricultural field. So you have basically disturbed the balance when it comes to the sediment load of water, right? And then the political issues are also there between the upstream and downstream states. It might be within state, within one country, between different states, or it might be between more than one countries. That is on those rivers which are inter-country in nature. Okay, so trans-boundary rivers, for example, Brahmaputra. So India has a continuous issue with China. India is having a continuous issue with Pakistan also because Indus is moving from India to Pakistan. Brahmaputra is moving to India from China. A lot of rivers are moving to India from Nepal. Other rivers are moving from India to Bangladesh. So there are transboundary rivers, right? So there can be issue. Rivers didn't know that we humans will create the political boundaries. They just flow. Yeah. So these are the important dimensions related to the large hydroelectric projects. I hope that the question will come from any of these dimensions. This dimension has already been asked by UPSC. This is one area, that is the environmental issues related to large hydro projects. This is one dimension on which I feel that independent question can be asked, right? So yeah, so that is all from my side for today. All the very best and steady heart. Yeah, thank you.